Ron found Nelms surveying in 1992 and serves as the principal. He's licensed in California, Arizona, and Nevada. He's a past president in 2018 of California Land Surveyors Association, CLSA. He's a CLSA Member of the Year in 2015, and during his time at Nelms Surveying, he's performed countless surveys that include boundary resolution, topographic surveys, as-built, ALTA surveys. In addition, he is also noted for his expert testimony in the courtroom. He is also an author of Putting Big Sticks by Little Sticks. I'll throw that in the follow-up email as well. Hopefully you've gotten a few purchases out of that, Mr. Ron. He is also gifted with 4 grandchildren. For recreation, he likes to play tennis and pickleball and enjoys reading and writing in his spare time. Tonight, monument preservation, monument conservation. It's got a few different names, but like I kind of put up in the follow-up email, it's a hot topic out west, and it's definitely a really good topic in California. So Ron's been working with it. He's been dealing with it in his own local area, and so he's got want to kind of just have a nice conversation about monument preservation and how we can kind of save some of these monuments moving forward, and whether it's the wildfires or any of these that we kind of run through, these natural disasters really start to tear up some of these monuments. So without further ado, of course, for our last one of 2022, I appreciate your time as always, Mr. Ron, and I will turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Trent. It's always good to be here. And this is the last in a series of 4 that I've done. And I really appreciate doing this. I have a lot of fun. I don't know if anybody else does, but preparing for this, it's always good. Like I said before, interrupt at any time. If you see something, have a question, otherwise I just keep going, or I'll stop periodically, see if there's questions. Can everybody see my screen where it says monument preservation? Everybody's good. Okay.
Yep, should be good.
So I'll go on. We all, as surveyors, we know monuments are a backbone. For the most part, that's what we have to have many times in boundary resolutions or anything that we do, whether it's a benchmark, whether it's for controls boundary or cadastral, whatever it is, monuments are extremely important what we do. And so, we all know about Cooley's decision about original monuments prevail. So if that original monument is gone, it's lost, you have to try to put it back in its original position as whatever means you can. You use the different evidence to get it there. They're important to our orderly progression of society. If we don't have these monuments to know where we are, where we can measure from, it makes it difficult to make it an orderly progression. And the purpose of what we're going to do tonight, we'll talk about, is that I believe and see, and it's getting better, a lot better, but about 15 years ago, the public had no understanding of what a monument was, what we did. There's lots of talks about what are we going to do about, sorry about the phone ring. It's if you could hear that. But they have no understanding. So CLSA, California Land Surveyors, I was monument chair, and we devised a presentation to get to the general public, because we felt that if we made the general public aware, then they would understand what it is. Because we get all have a hissy fit when they lose the monument, and we get all frustrated and why they should know better. And the thing is they don't, because it's just plain simple. It's ignorance. So we need to make them aware. But when we did go, I've used this presentation, I'm going to show you, to several organizations, and every one of them is extremely receptive. They're fascinated by it, and it comes out with good product, and it was very successful. The biggest culprit that we find today, that I've seen anyway, maybe you may disagree, is agencies. The agencies don't realize they're there. They don't understand what they are. And after the fact, they're gone and we don't find them. So again, what I'm going to show you is a presentation that I've used several times to service clubs and chambers, and what we try to focus on. Now, this was developed not just by, it was I was part of it, but there was a number of people on the committee that developed this. It's on the CLSA website. If you there's and I've robbed from this presentation, so it's not all everything in there, and I put kind of inserted a few things in there, but the general gist is here. So if you can find these presentations to agencies, uh, contractors, and service clubs, and to help that to go to the different these different with its presentation. Well, through this efforts of informing, I think we really developed in California. We've gained an awareness that's come quite a ways through the Monument Conservation Committee and our legislative committee. We were able to put in statute that makes it some requirements that what they have, agencies and others have to do before they start doing infrastructure. So with that, I see we have a lot of concerns today. So we go, you got Ukraine going on, you have the climate change, we got Taiwan, we got COVID and terrorists, and then we turn around and we go, we have monument loss. So the general public goes, well, we got all these other things going on. Now you want to talk about monuments? It's survey monuments, okay, but the audiences that I see that happens is the agencies. Many of the agencies have, not to pick on the civil engineers, but they have the civil engineers who are not aware of the survey monuments and why they're important. So we have to educate them and let them know why it's important. Utility districts, be that power companies or water districts, or a lot of them have their own. They have to oversee, like water banking districts. Difference. Service clubs, I think, is my favorite. I think Kiwanis. I'm a Rotarian, and I find it very receptive. Rotarians and Kiwanis and Lions and elk, whoever. It's a place to go to. A lot of movers and shakers in those service clubs. People that are into the city agencies, that maybe city council people. You have board of supervisors. You have maybe school districts. A lot of movers and shakers in these service clubs. They want to give back to their community, and you get to meet them, and then you can give a presentation. Chambers, Biggie gave presentations to a couple of chambers, very receptive. HOAs, I have not done HOAs, but I think HOAs are a huge culprit as well. It's that they don't understand. We have HOAs typically up in the mountains, where they've capped over all the concrete monuments. So how you find them? And so they're different. And then the contractors, of course, that they're aware of them. The purpose we give for the presentation is to give them an awareness of the increase that the monument loss, that we lose these monuments and they're important. We have to explain the relevance and why they're important. They determine the boundary. We all know. We help them determine locations, like we talked about a little earlier. So we also tell them what a monument looks like. We make it very basic. To us, it's a no-brainer. Well, that's what it's a rebar and cap. I know what that is. Brass cap, or a stake, or old wooden stake, or a stone. We know what it is. But we explain to them, and they're fascinated by it, by what we tell them. And we also tell them how it came to be, how they originated, who said them, why, where. and we explain it. You don't have to get into the gritty details, but we share with them their importance, why they're important, and give them a reason, or give them why it's important that you don't have boundary problems or issues, and they help resolve those. We also tell them about the benefits, um, and then how to avoid destruction, and then what they can do to help. So here, this is a slide that I took off the website, the CLSA website, and just a collage of monuments. And we don't actually have to explain to them or anybody, well, this is this type of monument or this. You pick a couple and we go with it. Just to show that they can be wide varying, and how, and wide, how it could be, what they could look like. Monument wells, we have a lot of those out here, like this one here over in the corner. Maybe a rebar and cap, tags in the curves. Just kind of go over that they have to be durable, and so they have an idea, so that hopefully they don't take them. The other thing is we talk to them about how they originated. Here we threw in a couple of maps. Uh, Here we just picked up a couple of record surveys somebody did, and said, okay, this is what's at these corners with arrows showing exactly what they were and how they went. Then we show them, if you're in a rural area, they might look like this. Here's one by a fence corner. Here's one sitting out here with some flagging. It says property corner maybe on it. And we just kind of show them what they can look like, what the possibility of it. Any questions so far? Here's a monument photo, but any questions so far? Are we good?
Ron,
Yeah.
Steve Perry here. How often do you ever run across somebody that says, well, why are there 2 or more monuments here? Has that question come up?
Not typically for who I present to. I think that's more, I get that from a surveyor, why there's 2. But yes, sometimes, what are most of the time, Steve, I get is somebody doesn't understand. They'll look at this lath and say, well, that's my property corner. So I have to explain to them, that's not the property corner. It's that rebar down here. That's the corner. So they oftentimes will get confused, and I tell them, well, look down here, scrape around a little bit. You might see this. Don't dig. Don't dig. It's an archaeological find. You don't want to scrape off anything. But I have and personally, this is mine. I tell them, send me a picture of it. Send me a close up and a picture of it, and then I can maybe help them find what that is. But the purpose is to get them to not destroy it. But to answer your question, Steve, I haven't gotten a lot of questions why there's double monuments, but they might say they're not understanding, and we're talking about a Rotarian or something that says, oh, well, that's a property corner, that's some sort of monument. But I don't know. Did I answer your question, Steve, or?
Yeah, I probably don't expect their lack of knowledge to even recognize that. But even in the cities that I've been in recently over the last few years, I go around our subdivision and there's a fence corner and there's 2 or 3 pins there in a 6-inch circle. And I just have to laugh about it. And it's just a steady diet of that, seems like.
Yeah. And if that comes up, I think, I tell them that sometimes people, they don't agree, and they may not be wanting a double monument, but yeah, I'm just explain to them that there's maybe somebody that doesn't agree, but why are there double? Yeah, I don't, go it. So, here's one where we tell them, this is a wire fence. This is a fence. This is the monument. The fences are not property lines. So just because your fence is the property lines does not make actually a fence property line, or a fence doesn't.
Hey, Ron.
Yes.
2 things. One, I love Jerry's comment. Just say one's a witness corner for the other.
Yeah.
That'll just squash it at that point.
Okay, let's put that in the presentation. Let me
Yeah,
write
yeah,
that
yeah.
one down.
And then there was a question earlier, and then Mike has his hand up. But they were asking who you were presenting this presentation to. So earlier,
Oh.
like where you kind of ran around, you did this presentation for a few different committees or chapters, or so.
Yeah, I personally have gone to chambers, a couple of chambers. I've also gone to a couple of Rotary clubs. I've been to a Lions Club, and agencies. And we'll get into this a little later. We went to the city of Bakersfield. I've gone to a couple of cities within my county. Others have done the same, trying to just make them aware. Keep in mind, this presentation is you're trying to just let them know you got to protect, they're out there and you need to protect them. If you see them, don't destroy them. I think I go into a little later. One of them we presented to uh, a, a city, and there's a contractor that was there. Well, he went later, years later. This is years later, a couple of years later. He went out and started and they had to do a thing for this put a utility line or something in for the city, and he started digging diagonally across the street. And he, as he's digging, he looks down and he sees a concrete monument. He knew it was a survey monument because of the presentation. So he stopped, he notified the city, and the city had us go out and locate it and locate that monument before it got destroyed. But there's one, and it was a major corner. I think it was a quarter corner. So it was a major corner in the city, and we were able to preserve it and tie it out before it got destroyed. But that's all it is they see something to question it. That's what we're trying to get them to do in all of this. So it makes our life easier. Then we go in this one, we give them a little bit more of monument photos, a little bit more of what's going on. Here's a map. Monuments are shown in record maps. In California now, I don't know other states. In California, you set a monument, or if you do a property survey, you have to file either a corner record or record of survey. It's required. So a lot of states do that. I hear some states don't. We do here. And so once it's set, something has to be filed. Now we do run across the course, and it's kind of a sidebar here. Well, I know we run across some of those in the late 70s and 80s where there were the older surveyors. I'm going to say the older ones because I'm not old, right? But they're the older surveyors said, I don't have it. Why do I need to do that? And so they wouldn't file anything. And so you could run across unrecorded monuments. Sometimes I come across those, but we try to tell them in the state of California, you have to file some, the surveyor has to file some. So if you see it, it should be on file. It's supposed to be anyway. And also to educate them that if they have a survey done, the surveyor needs to file something. So we go on to say why they're important. Survey monuments are physical evidence of real property boundary. And we also pointed out that it's not just boundary that they could be used for. It could be locating the easements, especially public agencies. They're concerned with right-of-ways, say for like Caltrans, some sort of divisional highways or whatever state you're in. They need to know where these monuments are because it helps them locate their easements, because they're concerned with where their easements are. Utility companies want to know if they're destroyed. They want to know where their easements are. So we make it so that they're important for them. So you make it about them is what you're trying to do. You say what happens. You make it about them, of why they need to do it. What's their incentive to go after it? The loss dramatically decreases the assurance that improvements and infrastructure are properly placed. You lose them and you go to put that infrastructure in, it's going to be difficult to put back in. You may not be putting it right back on. And we're going to give a story. I'm going to show you a little bit of case actual happened. And I think it's a kind of a granddaddy of what you do, what you don't do, how you do it, what you shouldn't do, but how to remedy it and have a good, decent story come out of it. They want to know, it's particularly agencies and others, the cost savings. And if you're going to a service club, they're interested in saving costs, that the agencies are not spending too much money, or spending more money. So it's everybody's about cost. How do you keep the cost down? So it's a benefit to preserve something now than to try to, take you 3-4 days to put it back, to redo something because of loss. It preserves the original locations. Original monuments prevail, and so you at least preserve those original locations. And going back to Steve's scenario with double monuments, at least you're saving all the monuments there, so that you can figure out what you're going to use, why it happened, who's using those different monuments. So you're preserving the location so that surveyor can determine what happened. Tax savings, the money goes in for big projects, and if you have adequate survey control, you can save on taxes. Protection of property rights, because the politicians are interested in that, because if they have a constituent comes to them and says, hey, you're not doing you're allowed the city or whatever it is to take out my monuments, so now I don't know where my property rights are. And biggie, as Mr. Stahl would help us keep out of this, is stay out of court, right? How do you stay out of that?
Hey, before you move to the next one,
Yeah.
Ron, Schroeder had some comments he wanted to chime in on.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, Ron, you're on track, and yeah, you tailor this presentations to your audience group. I have one anecdotal thing, not to rabbit track too much. I was the first Indian land surveyor for Alaska, and something blew up and went out in the village's knack-knack. There's a fish cannery next to a trust, Indian trust town site lot, and the homeowner was all sure that they had the cannery was going trespassing over trust lands, and they got the solicitors and everybody going, all the realty people, all the solicitors. And finally I got involved, and I says, whoa, wait a minute here, let's see. And it had just been surveyed because there was funding by BIA to survey all these, or survey trust lands, and had been surveyed like 2 years before. And I go, how, it doesn't sound right. So I called the landowner, and I said, and they explained, and they were all agitated. And this cannery was on their land. And I said, why don't you send me a picture of the monument? Because they kept saying that, well, we know the monument. And it was a 2-inch fill pipe for an oil tank, had a cap on it. When they took the picture, the digital picture, but I was all set to get on a jet and go 500 miles to go out there to find this. But the public doesn't know what a monument is. So you're right on with your presentation. And then part of that Bill's program was all these rural villages, all the tribes had realty people, and I traveled around and did a little show, showed them what a monument was, showed the records and pictures like you're doing here. And then we went out and we let them put their hands on, see what they are. This is a bearing tree. This is a monument. And they felt very empowered. So, the education is good, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. And then just quickly, I don't want to take up a lot of time here. In Alaska, in our Recordation Act for monument records and record of surveys, we put in statutory law that you must. There was no you shall or you could or here's a vehicle if you want to. But prior to construction, any construction infrastructure, you had to file a monument record with ties before construction started. And when I was a regional surveyor for DOT in Alaska, any plans that went through, the DOT crews, part of the workflows, they went out and did the initial evaluation of what the property was for the right of way. And so they filed monument records for all of those. And then when the contractors went in, it was in their statement of work. They wouldn't close them out. They wouldn't give them their final money for building that road until they'd replaced every one after that. So that's real powerful in some states, not only to have the vehicle of a monument record, but have in your state law that prior to any construction that would disturb an existing property monument, you must file a monument record with ties before construction, and then you must replace it within 90 days of completion of construction with equivalent type monument. So sorry.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'll piggyback on that, Mike, is that we did a couple of presentations to the cities and here, and they instituted their into their statute that you have to do exactly what you said. We're going to talk about a little bit later, but a pre-construction corner record and a post-construction. And they had it that you had to do this or you wouldn't get your money. I had a call one time from the general contractor it was the civil engineer, and I won't name who he was, but he wasn't aware of pre-construction or I'm picking on a civils. I'm sorry. Is there civils in here? No offense. But but anyway, he was a practicing surveyor. But he wasn't aware of pre-construction or post-construction. So he gets this call from the general contractor, says, "Oh, you got to put these in. I can't get my money." So they withheld their 10% until the monuments were in place, this particular city. So the engineer, the surveyor, he called me and says, "What is this?" So I was actually able to educate the surveyor what the laws were, is that you have to do pre-construction and post-construction. And after he got an education, then, oh, I get it now. But the money was held up. They would not give him anything until they do it. And until they educating them. I think that's the key, is to go in. And you're right, Mike. I mean, you tell them what a monument looks like, and I'll talk about a little later, or it's going to a little later, but I'll tell it now, is that I gave a presentation to the Bakersfield Chamber, and the executive director now still comes up to me. He goes, "I saw some of these monuments over here." He's telling me what they look like, and I see them everywhere now. They're on the curbs and everything, and I can see them out in the middle of the street. I'm dreaming of them. And I hate you now. Very good relationship there, but is built from that. But
we got one more.
Yeah,
Ron, Roberto, go for it.
Hey, Trent. No, I just wanted to chime in on what Michael said. I took a civil engineering professor from Cal Baptist University to go check out some boundary corners just to enhance the survey course that they're offering out there. And he was so surprised when we found them on the floor. We had to dig out the maps online through the flood control district, and so he was just in awe when we found them on the ground. And so we're just trying to incorporate some of that practical stuff into the surveying curriculum. It just makes it exciting to look for these monuments. I know I became a believer when I took a group of students out there go look for these monuments, and I actually gave up. I gave up on searching for one of these monuments. I just didn't want to dig it any further, and that one student did not give up. He persevered and he found it after he dug out like a foot of dirt. And so anyways, he just didn't give up. He shamed me pretty well. And then what's also interesting about these monuments is that we're looking for these monuments around ELAC, and it's pretty neat to use a topo map that was put together by Kevin Hills years ago, before he became Public Works, the surveyor out there for Orange County Public Works. So it's nice to tie in the map with someone that we have had come in as a guest speaker, and then students kind of see the history behind this individual and how he has been able to progress through his career and now become the main surveying guy at Orange County. So it's nice to tie in the history behind who put this map together, where did these monuments get described first, and where is this person at now. Larry Case is one of those individuals that's around ELAC. I think he's 5411, LS 5411. So the students know about this monument because we always see that same person's name on that monument when I have students go out there and set up the machine on these monuments. And just recently, we submitted a small little proposal to our district school to see if we can get some funds to look for these monuments. And then I attached a document that I found through the LA County parcel map viewer website. And the map was put together by Johnson Frank and Associates years ago. And so it was nice to see, again, the timeline, the history behind these maps, who put these things together, where these individuals are at now. It's just nice to bring everything together into the classroom. So it's something about those monuments that seems to attract a lot of students. And I am a licensed civil, so take it easy on us, man.
No, we accept him. We also talk when we go on, we talk about their causes. You tell them mainly a lot of construction activities, installation of improvements. They go in and you just go, okay, did not realize that there's a monument out there. And the adage is, well, you preserve that sewer manhole, you preserve that water valve. Why not the monument? And so try to educate them that that monument's even probably more important, or as important, if not more important as those utility hookups, those water valves and those sewers. So, and even gas, whatever. The private land development, private landowners going in and they just, here's the pin, they pull the pin and put a fence post in. So we try to talk to developers too, save them. Putting in fences and retaining walls is another culprit. So we tell them these causes. So if you're going to put a fence or retaining wall on your property line, make sure that you get it looked at by a surveyor. We talk about the effects of monument destruction. Yeah, to get an elevation certificate or do a flood study analysis could go up if you don't have the benchmark. Today, I know we have, you can have the GPS and post-process and everything, but sometimes those benchmarks, these structures are being put in by a benchmark, so they're important. It could result in inability to locate easements and setbacks. Again, this is important to utility companies. It's important to the districts that have easements across people's properties. If you lose those monuments, then your easement where you put could be affected. Disrupts harmony. And nobody wants that, is that you want to have a neighbors squabbling and fighting and going and drawing the guns out or whatever they're doing. We also emphasize, again, like we said earlier, monuments, not fences, identify your property lines. Now this one here, I can't quite remember why we put this in here, but it destroyed monuments creates safety issues within the right of way. So I can't remember why that was put in there, but maybe somebody can enlighten me a little bit, except that say this is your right of way and don't get past it. If anybody can think of something, let me know. It also slows development, which has a negative impact on the economy. This, if your monuments are lost and you got to spend weeks trying to get that back, control back in, it delays it. I can't get my surveyor out there for the next 3 to 4 weeks or a couple of months or whatever it is that you can get there. And so it slows it down and it's not able to proceed. It compromises the right-of-way reestablishment. How do you establish your right-of-way? And we're going to go a little bit over this in a little bit, the case study that we had. Compromise the integrity of boundaries, of course, we know that, but we explain that, why it does, why it compromises it. Here's one. Last week, an excellent presentation. I think it was Ian, right? Ian did the presentation about Simultaneous, and he brought up an example. Wasn't able to attend, but I did listen to it. By the way, I'm a big fan of Mentoring Mondays now. If I can't make it, I listen to it later.
Nice.
But he mentioned about they lost all the monuments in a particular subdivision, and they were using houses and fences and road improvements and everything to put it back in. Well, that's quite expensive to do, and it all fit together very well. And so it's fortunate that all the improvements fit, and it brought it back in. And I think it's a good idea how to get it back in place, getting the improvements, splitting improvements, and getting it back into place. But we also show them. Here's an example. See this pole up here? Well, the utility company, they preserved the monument. There it is. I don't know how they got that pole so close to that. They're a fantastic utility company. They got some great workers there to be able to put that pole and not disturb that monument. We all kind of know what happened here, I think, is, they just kind of pulled it out, put it back in when they put the pole in. So there's another one where they capped over down here, the monument well, filled full of asphalt. How many have we ran onto those? The frustration with that one, trying to figure out how to get them. But there's a nail there. So that's a frustration. This one I like to use with, this one opens a lot of eyes, I think, for to why you preserve a monument, particularly to the Rotary Club, to the service clubs, chambers, because now they get this, and even the agencies kind of get this, is that you out in the middle of the street, this photo was sent to me, but out in the middle of the street, the monuments are gone because they did a street improvement project 20 years ago. So they're gone. So then they come in and they do handicap improvements. I'm all for handicap improvements, but right in the middle, this was there. It ties to that monument in the middle of the street. And they did it all the way around the block, all the way around the subdivision. They're gone. So I tell them, because of that loss, these two neighbors up here get into a big fight. They want to put a wall in. And they get a survey, and one surveyor says it's here, and another surveyor says it over here. So a simple survey that should only take in 1 day to do is going to end up taking days to do, and even more. And so that's the frustration that I run into as a private land survey, as a private practice. I get a call for a small, and I do a lot of little smaller surveys, and I get a call to go do a survey that should take only a day, and it ends up taking 3 or 4. And I tell the people, it's going to take 3 or 4 days because the monument loss. Well, a lot of times they will just say, no, we're not going to do it. So now they have to put up with an encroaching neighbor that they think isn't coming onto their property, and they have no way to defend their property. Or they have ways, but they're limited now because they choose not to defend, and thus subjecting themselves for other rights of use and different issues. So did the city in this case do a benefit by doing a street improvement project and not checking to see where all these monuments are located before they did it? I say, no, they didn't do a benefit. They caused these two people to get in a big fight and an argument and disrupt the harmony of the neighborhood. That's not what the city's about. That's not what the agency is supposed to be doing. They're supposed to allow harmony and keep it going. So I stress the point, and I was able to plead with them. This is a scenario that can happen, like Ian brought up last week. Fortunately, they were able to figure it out, but it took days and days to do it. A survey that should only taken a day to do, it's costing several days to do it.
We got that.
So yeah, go ahead.
Schroeder's going to chime in there. Rick.
So if I can follow up on what I just said. So we have a lot of professional surveyors that work for agencies. They work for a DOT, or they work for a city or municipality or a county. And man, if they can get on board with this, so you get whatever construction plan that did this, and if it's a work item and it's identified, reference and replace this monument. I mean, it's chump change in the course of a big improvement project. But if you outline it all there, so it takes some diligence, because if the agency, you know, local or state, has a review process, and the land surveyor pulls up all the records, even if you didn't have a field survey, and say, hey, you know, look for this, if a monument's there, reference it and replace it. It makes your point, Ron, that, yeah, that's money well spent, because then it benefits the landowners, it benefits the surveyors that got to go out there and put that survey in there for that fence line and so forth. So it's key. It's easy to forget that a portion of our professional groups, you know, work for these agencies, but having done it and being you know, for a statewide DOT surveyor, I mean, everything kind of tracks the same. You know, all these plans and specs are coming, and they want to get out to construction season up here. You know, we got 2 seasons in Alaska, winter and road construction. And but if there's due diligence by those surveyors, at least point it out, hey, look for it, reference it and file a monument record, and then replace it after construction, and it's a work item listed in the specs, and everybody bids it, everybody's aware of it, we could save a lot of monuments.
Yeah, I
Good point.
agree.
Yeah, George is going to chime in on something similar you put in the chat, but go for it.
Well, I'm not going to talk about that so much, but in this case, the obvious solution is to use the reference monuments that are there to replace the monuments that they reference. And once that's back in, if they take these out, you can go re-reference it again, and you've still got everything. And you know, obviously in this thing, they're just replacing handicap ramps, or they're not tearing up the street improvements in the middle of the street or the middle of the intersection. It's just easy to put that monument back in and go on with life. File a record, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But the city of Reno back in the 50s monumented a bunch of street center lines with center line monuments. Fortunately, later on in I think about the 70s, the surveyor in the city of Reno came back and tied some of those monuments, but most of those monuments during street improvements ended up in the Lockwood dump east of town. Not very useful there.
Yeah, not at all. Good point. Let's see. Well, then we tell them how they can help, because you always want to leave, what are you going to do to help out? So we tell them, know what a monument looks like, and like this, here, bring a monument with you if you have to. Here, you know, bring some rebar, a cap. This is how long it is. I mean, sometimes you do that. I've done it sometimes here. Undersigned monument conservation laws. Now, again, California calls it conservation, or CLSA did, because there was a concern of mixing it up with preservation. There's a preservation fund that's put forth that I think the city of Los Angeles takes some revenue off of. I can't remember subdivisions that they put a monument preservation fund together, and then they could the surveys can be, it might be Orange County or LA County, one of them, and then they use that. So they didn't want to confuse it with that, so they call it conservation. And then how it impacts you. There's a misdemeanor for removal of a monument, believe it or not, in California, Penal Code 605. So putting in legislatively that maybe put it, and I'm going to point that out in the next slide, but understand their liability, including the financial loss that shall be incurred if monuments are not properly conserved. If you talk money, people listen. If you're going to lose money and there's a lot of liability that and liability, what could happen if this is lost? I'm exposed. Be an advocate. We had to tell them, be an advocate. Go to the agencies. Like I said, in the service clubs, a lot of movers and shakers, and they go to the agencies and say, well, hey, why are you're tearing up my street? Did you do monument preservation here? Did you go in and tie out all the monuments? Go tell them. And homeowner associations ensure protection of your neighborhood. So in an HOA, you see if you're on a committee or you're on that, make sure that happens, that they take care of those monuments, even though you're in an HOA. And then always in doubt, you consult with a land surveyor. If you don't know if it is, ask the question. You know, I've had to call where I think it was PG&E will put a big dollar size when we used to do silver dollars. Okay. So I'm dating myself, but the silver dollar size emblem in the side of a pole, which is just the pole identity. And they think, well, is that a tie to a property corner or something? But you know, I prefer them to ask the question and say, no, it's not, but you're on the right track. Here's
I gotta tell one story because this is just too funny.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm chief cadastral surveyor for Alaska, and the front desk calls and says, "Hey, we got Joe Blow here. He wants to talk to you." And so I go out and meet him. He says, "Well, can you come down to?" He says, "I'm parked at the curb. You know, I'm in the federal building in Anchorage." I go down there in the back of his pickup truck. He's got like about, I don't know, 10 or 12 friggin' GLO and BLM monuments. And remember how they would stamp on the cap, you know, penalty $250 for destruction and removal. And so he had them all in the back of his pickup truck. He had run a cat down a couple townships and lined up on them and dug them up. And he says, "I want to know who to write the check to." He says, "I talked to a surveyor, surveyor is going to cost a lot more than $250 a piece." So he wanted to write out a $2,500 check for 2 townships worth of survey monuments he had in the back of his truck.
Oh no. Prevention ideas. If you don't have a statute in your state, maybe consider creating one. Strengthen the statute. I put up here 8771 of the Land Surveyors Act, and that's in California. What happened is I was on a legislative committee at the time too, and with MonCon, and there was some talk. How do we strengthen the existing statute to preserve a monument? There was a lot of misunderstandings about that the agency was supposed to preserve that monument, and it wasn't in the PE code either, and it wasn't in several others construction. So the LegCom and CLSA put forth and put it all in statute so that they all cross-referenced each other. And one of the things that they did that we put it in there, it made it clear you're going to do a pre-construction corner record. If you're doing a street improvement project or anything like that, you're going to do pre-construction. You're going to go locate and find all the monuments, file a corner record with it, and then you're going to do a post-construction corner record. So cities that I've been involved with know the law. They did it. We did pre-construction corner records, put them in place. This particular city that I was working with required the contractor to hire a surveyor to put the monument in. And I talked about a little earlier about that, where they did the post-construction corner record. Agency incorporates during permitting. I've seen that. I think it was Mr. Schroeder said something about getting something in there for when you're doing your permitting or something along that line. But I know one city in California that went in and says, if you're going to do any permitting, any street improvements or putting a wall in that requires a permit, you're going to make sure that you've consulted with a surveyor to make sure there's no monuments in the area. There was one particular city that did it, a little bit of backlash. He got a little heat from it, but I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. It's a permitting process. It's a smaller city, so they're able to do it. That they have to have it signed off by a surveyor. There are no monuments within this area. Put it in your development standards. Talk to the agencies to get it into the development standards that you're going to set monuments this way. You're going to preserve them, and well, okay. So this is that's basically the presentation that we use. But here's a case study. Well, I call it a case study. This is something I actually ran into, and what happened was, give a brief history. In Bakersfield, the traffic is, you're familiar with this great state of Bakersfield is what I call it, but the 99 runs north south through the town, through the city. Bakersfield's a city of probably a little over 500,000 people, and it's spread out quite a bit over it. And I think, what was it, 700 square miles or something like that I heard the other day. And so it spreads. This is probably about 7 or 8 miles across here, and then it's another 7 or 10 miles out to about from the center to here. So it's like 15 miles or something in there. And it's about about 10 miles this way. So it's quite large. The freeway, the main thorough is this 99. So because the city is growing pretty rapidly, Thomas, Bill Thomas, if you remember, was on the head of the House Ways and Means Committee, and he, before he left, got a chunk of money for Bakersfield to put these project in. And the money was to go not to Caltrans, which is our state jurisdiction. It was to go directly to the city of Bakersfield, and they would be the project manager on this, with the idea at the end of it, they would turn it over to Caltrans. So Caltrans is going to accept it, but it has to be to their standards when it's all said and done. But the funneling of the money went in. So it's called the TRIP project. And this particular project is the West Side Parkway. And I hope you can see my cursor, but there's right here, it goes from 7 miles, there's 7 miles from here to here across. This is the West Side Parkway. The rest of these, fortunately, weren't started, and this is back in, I think, 2015, somewhere around there. They built this freeway right here, and it was done. Fanfares, everybody. We opened it up, and the ribbon ceremonies, but it's still jurisdiction by the city. Later, they're now building right now. There is what they call the West Side, the Centennial Corridor that goes through here, right from the center. This is where 58 and 99. Now, background is 58 ends right at a shopping center. So there's shopping center right here. So you run this freeway, and boom, right at the end of it, there's a shopping center. So they determined that the best route was to go through this portion of the city up, and so they did a condemnation process and went through here, and this corridor right here is to be being built right as we speak. Well, after this one was completed, I get a call. See if I can remember where this, yes, right here. I'm doing a survey over here in this portion of Johnson Road. They want me to, so I need to get this corner over here, this red dot. It's not there because there's a big bridge. There's there's a bridge running right off of Allen Road right here. And so I contacted the city surveyor, and I said, where's the monument for? Well, first I contacted the agency, the TRIP leg. The TRIP is a leg off of the city of Bakersfield. They're in charge of building what we just looked at just before. They're in charge of getting that all in place. I went to them and I said, who's your surveyor of record for the West Side Parkway? They told me Security Paving. I said, they're a contractor. Who's the surveyor? Well, they didn't know it, and they weren't being snide, they weren't being snippet or anything. They just didn't know. They thought we hired them to do this. They didn't know what my question was. So I finally got the answer, and they found out who it was, who was the surveyor of record on it, talked to him a bit and said, well, the city didn't tell us to do it. So we didn't tell us to put these, to locate these things. I kind of cringed a little bit. And then I went to the city surveyor and I sat down with him and the public works director. And I said to him, I said, did you do a survey in here and locate all these monuments? Now keep in mind, there's 450 lots from here. Now this is just portion of the survey, but for 7 miles, this is a mile from here to here. But picture 450 lots all the way across this West Side Parkway. All these lots at a value at the time, we're in Bakersfield. So I said, well, let's put a value of $200,000 on each of these lots. Went to the city, and they first weren't very receptive. They were like, well, what's the big deal? Why are you here? Just go away, leave us alone. And then I said, I pointed this out. I put this little map, put a map out there and says, all these lots, put a value of 200,000. You are exposed to $90 million because this monument here represents a half a mile in here. I think as surveyors, we often say what it's going to cost to replace these monuments, and we give a value for what it cost us to do. What we should be doing, I'm kind of preaching here a little bit, we should be saying, what's the value of the property we're surveying? And so when I put it in those values of $90 million, they were listening. I says, each one of these people in here have lost their property. They've lost their property corners. They don't know where their property lines are anymore. What are we going to do? Further, I went on and I said, well, because not to pick on the engineers, Alberto, but I said, if you put in a bridge and the contractor did not put in any rebar into that bridge, what would you do? Tear it out. Tell them they got to do it. I says, that's what you got here. You have no rebar in your infrastructure, in your project here. You don't even know if it's in the right place. I use the illustration. I'm not going to do this and I wouldn't recommend it to my client, but if I was tenacious or, nefarious of somewhat, I could say, well, this wall that you put in over here, it's about 3 inches onto your property. I tell my client that. My client goes to the city and says, hey, you're 3 inches on my property. What are you going to do, city? Are you going to settle? What are you going to fight it? What are you going to do? Are you going to move it? What are you going to do? So you're immediately you're in a contentious situation just by that fact. Now, whether that'll come to fruition, it hasn't yet, but they're still exposed. So they saw the light. Lights come on, they figure it. Now they're wanting to work. And they did. And I think it's just educating them. And at first they all thought the contractor was responsible, but we cited the state statute of the PE Act and the LS Act of how they're responsible. And they just didn't understand. So and I'll go back a little bit. When I first talked to the trip, before I talked to the city, I asked, I want all your maps of the West Side Parkway. Pulled the maps out, and there's construction map plans. Not a single bearing or distance on it of where the right-of-way was. Everything was off of some coordinate system that they used. They cited a couple of known HPG endpoints, but didn't give an epoch, didn't give how they located it, what the coordinate they used, nothing. There was no bearing, no distance. I don't know how they put that freeway in and without dimensions. And so that there, the surveyor, how did the surveyor put it in? I don't know. So we went, and it didn't even have a base as a bearing. It had no courses. It had no control points identified, no monumentation. And then they realized again, like I said, a major problem. And like I said, you were exposed to 450 properties. So we met with the city and the public works and explained to them that this is the problem. Since then, they invited our local chapter down to give a presentation to their inspectors and to their design engineers. We came in and they were very, very very capricious. Is that the word? They wanted to fix this thing. Because of the length of this thing, our local chapter decided, we talked to them, we were conversing with them. We said, we have no other choice. This is too big for us. We don't know we know how to remedy it, but we need to get the board of registration involved. So a complaint was filed with the board of registration. The board of registration took a hold of it, went to the city and surveyor and cited him. And then they said, how are you going to fix this? And they worked with the board of directors and was working with them very nicely and worked very well with them and fixed the problem. They did some things that probably I wouldn't have done it that way as far as how to fix it. They did, I don't know how many, 400 corner records or something in there. I would have probably done a record survey. But the point is they went out and reset the corners back. Now, the problem with this is that even though they did this, these properties are always going to be in question. You know, if the surveyor that came in and set these corners, now hopefully they rely on them and then they're not going to be a problem, but they're still going to always be in question because you lost the original. But it's a good story in that how we fixed it. We got got everything into a cohesive manner, fixed it, got it, and now the city, go back. I don't know if I can go back. Let's see, previous. All the rest of these projects now, they went in and did actual surveys and monument locations, particularly the Centennial Corridor where all these houses are in here. They went in and located the center line, all the monuments in here and fixed that problem. They fixed this 24th Street down here and they're fixing the rest of all of it because of that, because of the local chapter that got involved with it and was proactive with it to get it fixed. So it's a good story and how not to do it.
Yeah.
And then how to remedy it if it does happen. But I think that this story could go to other agencies of how, what not to do. And it's a good example, I think. So, do I have any questions on this so far?
No, I like how you turned
None.
turned the
Okay.
turned a
Yeah.
nice story into it though, right? As far as being able to kind of salvage it moving forward. So it's definitely a good case study moving forward for sure.
Yeah, I think it is. Let's see. Okay. Now this is kind of coming to the end of my presentation and we can talk about it, but I throw this in a little for comedic relief, a little thing. I says now, and you may have seen this, if you've seen this presentation, you may have seen this. It says now, we have established that monument preservation is important, right? However, there are those who don't agree. And who are these despicable people? Well, there's the Joker. He wants chaos. Well, Hannibal wants to eat him. And Dracula, well, he hates them. He particularly hates those wood stakes, right? But, however, there are responsible people who endorse the preservation of survey monuments. So who are these? Well, the presidents obviously endorse them, and Mother Teresa believes in them, and it goes without saying, right? Oh, any questions of what we presented?
That's awesome. I love it.
So I think the case is closed on that one, right? So have any questions, Trent?
Nothing. There was one earlier, but I figured we'd wait till the end. And is there a protocol for replacing bent monuments? How bent is too bent? Tying in the spin hole can vary from tech to tech. I think Drew jumped off already, but that was a question that he had asked earlier on. But
Yeah, I mean, everybody's got their own methods. I'm a big, I'm a kind of a spin hole guy. If I can get that entry point, okay.
yeah,
But
exactly.
and as far as pre-construction corner record, I know there's some people, and if they want to talk about it, but there's people that you put a coordinate on it and you use your GPS and you have a base unit set up a half a mile away, and you go set up back on and put that back in. Personally, I'm not a big fan of that. I think you got half a mile of possible error, but I always like to tie out my monuments nearby, pull swing ties over to the other sides, line sites, whatever, right close to wherever the monument is. I'm a big proponent of that personally, rather than just get a coordinate on it and come back out and put it when it's to me, I kind of cringe a little bit with that. But everybody's on their own. The important thing is get that thing back where it was supposed to be, where it was before.
Yeah,
Not supposed to be where it was. So, any other?
Steve, I see you typing. I don't know if you want to unmute and just say it, but Steve's
Does anybody
there.
go
You
ahead? I'll wait.
Okay, he just great approach to the problem surveyors have had with the public and utilities. Yep.
Yeah.
Nice.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep, absolutely.
Anybody have a horror story they'd like to share or anything? Feel free. I don't know how much time you want to go with this, Trent, but it looks like I got another 20 minutes.
Yeah, whatever. If anybody wants to chime in and have talk about their situation they're dealing with or not, but Pat, go
I
for it.
don't have a horror story, but I have something that I had a lot of fun doing. When I lived over in Reno, there's a group over there called Ollie, OLLIE. And basically, it was a membership of people 55 years of age or older from the community. And the lady that got me involved in it got interested in my background as a surveyor and says, well, we've never had topics like that for these 55 years and older people that meet regularly. So I put together about 8 or 10 little presentations that were maybe a half hour at a time. And I kind of looked at them as something to inform those that don't even know what a land surveyor does. And I did it on like monuments, what are they, and descriptions. I used things like from Virginia City, where they were familiar with the town, and I've done a lot of surveying there. And it was a lot of fun because I had people that came to one or two at first and didn't know what it was all about, and they just kept returning because it's something that they had never seen. Now, I don't know how far it went because I was dealing with a lot of people that were close to retirement, they're already in retirement. But it was a fun thing in that city to have an organization that just tried to bring in information pertinent to the community and the residents within the community. I still have all those little Ollie presentations, and I've thought about recycling those sometime in some way.
Yeah. And I find that, Steve, is it's just surprising how interested people are, to listen to what do you do? And they're fascinated by it. And I think if you're in private practice like me, I find it as an excellent marketing tool to promote my business and the profession and to preserve monuments. It's an excellent way to get a foot in the door to meet people. And so it's something that comes natural for us as surveyors, but I think surveyors need to learn how to communicate a little better than what we do. Well, we tend to be a little anal retentive sometimes, and OCD, but if we can learn how to, they're fascinated with, they just, how did you go find that? How did you go find that corner in the middle of nowhere? I'm amazed with Steve he going out and finding monuments in the middle of the forest somewhere. I'm amazed by that. So learning how to do that, but excellent stories. They love it.
Exactly.
It does.
Go for it, Pat, and then we'll go to Mike.
Yeah, in the future, Ron, what do you think will be the best method to locate those PLSS corners, whether it be GPS coordinates, whether it be bearing trees, bearing objects? Prior to retiring, I'd always take 4 bearing trees, put a GPS coordinate on my certificate, and I'd also give ties, solar ties, and ground distances to PLSS corners on the north, south, east, or west section line, depending on where the corner was. What do you think the future is for witnessing corners?
What do I think? Well,
Yeah.
that's a good question, Pat. I mean, how can I'm a little fearful that we're going to a coordinate type method. A little concerned, I don't say fearful, maybe concerned that we're going to more of a coordinate type method instead of actual practice of how to preserve. And I think that the younger generation that's coming up, and I'm enthused about new surveyors coming in, and with all that's happening now with coming on and the promotion of getting younger surveyors in. But I think as older, like me, should be advocating for possible error methods. If you're measuring from a half mile away, the constellation of the satellites could be different from the day to tomorrow to whenever. I mean, how precise is that going to get? I don't know. There's an excellent book out called Making of the Meter, and they came up with, the guy was anal retentive, and he talked, one surveyor that did the survey was all okay with it, but the other surveyor, he couldn't let it go. And they didn't realize there was error. They had no error theory at the time when they made that meter. So they thought they could get precision. Well, later they came up with, a young college student came up with error theory, and that's what we have today, is that there's error in every measurement. To me, I'm concerned about measuring a half mile away from some base unit to put it back in versus I got a local ties. I can pull out my pocket tape or my chain or whatever and get that thing a little more to the most precise position. And I also see that as we go forward, measurement's going to be even more. I mean, look at the way, if you go back 100 years ago, you get within a couple of feet, you're great. Today, we're getting it within a tenth or less than a tenth. We're going, okay, we're okay. Future, is it going to, I mean, we look back at the people that did it and they're 10 feet off, and we go, wow, they were 10 feet off. But that's the method. That's what the tools they had at the time. Today, 50 years from now, or whatever, 100 years from now, they go, man, they were 200ths off. How yeah, it's horrible. They did. How did they get that? Well, you got to look back at the tools that are being used. But I'm a little concerned about our profession going to more of a coordinate system. I think it's needed. Don't get me wrong. I think it's needed with tectonic plates and everything, and that's stuff that's way above my pay grade. And the measuring of the geoid and everything like that, I think that is very much needed. But for boundary retracement and establishing somebody's right, property right, I think we need to be careful of measuring that way, because we're dealing with people's property rights and the individual versus some other types of measurement. I don't know if I answered that question, but that's a little bit of my concern.
Yeah, pretty much. We put the coordinates on so that somebody can walk right out there and find it. If they find a monument, great. Whether it's exactly where I said it was or not, it's up to them whether they want to stick in another monument next to it. You know, I can't stop them. But we take our bearing trees, we blaze them, scribe them, paint, spike them, and tag them, and then we'll pull distances off those, swing the arcs, and generally you're within, you know, a few hundredths of what they measure, and you accept the monument. If the thing is not there and there's no, the bearing trees are all gone, all you have then is the ties to adjacent property corners that I put on my certificates. And in that case, then I'd try to match see how my GPS compares to where those monuments are, do the math, and prorate it in. Or in this case, it would be an obliterated monument because you do have some other information. But basically, that's what you want to do.
I think it's important that you get it back to the original position. That's the objective, right? However, however you got to do that. At the end of the day, if that's it, I mean, like I said, I'm not telling somebody they got to do it my way. I'm telling, at the end of the day, it's where it's supposed to be. That I'm comfortable. I'm confident that that's it.
Yeah, that goes without saying.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a good segue to what I was going to have. And I did a 2-hour presentation during COVID when they had the 7 Western States Conference on use of coordinates for boundary evidence. And a lot of that was based on, I was on the working committee with, you know, other cadastral chiefs and Bob Dahl in the 2009 manual. So, you know, there's a section of the manual that went in, you know, not saying that you shall or you will, it's written in true manual language, but here's the steps you need to do to get in the computational and the positional footsteps of the original surveyor. And if you can satisfy that, it might be reliable evidence, or it may be the best available evidence.
Yeah.
Again, the situation where you had a glorious GLO monument and 4 bearing trees and you know, a clear magnet under it and all that, and that big yellow D9 came through there and took everything. But if you did have that coordinate, and if it was properly documented, I guess without digging into that too far, I was able to get a video of that presentation, although it's 2 hours, but I have the PowerPoint. And so I guess I'm talking myself into, Trent. I mean, you said in that you think you moderated it. I would be glad to represent that on Mentoring Mondays, because I think what the discussion we just had was really good. And we did polls on that presentation, and I provide some different scenarios of, you know, somebody that turned in an opus position and looking at the RMS, and can you repeat that down to that 100th? We deal with different property values and so forth in Alaska than you do in Bakersville, California. But sometimes it might be the only evidence. What are you going to do? Ignore it and go start double proportioning on some township, you know, with minimal monumentation? So it's good discussion. And it kind of really, that's not why I raised my hand. I was going to give you another anecdotal story of when I was doing the training for these realty specialists and for BIA that worked in the villages. We're out in Dillingham, and there's a road between Dillingham and Allegnagik. It doesn't connect to any other road. It's about 20 miles long, and there's a lot of native allotments along there. So I trained all these people. They know nothing, and showed them the records. And BLM had in Alaska SDMS, spatial data management system, so they could pull the coordinate out of there and have the datum in it. And I knew I had before the class, I went out and found some allotment corners along there. So had the class, and they all had all their handhelds, and they went it in, and I had them, showed them what the record, that this is what the character of the monument is, and has these bearing trees. Nobody's looking for yellow tags. I can see it. So I got like 20 people, because it's Bristol Bay Native Association. They had a big realty department. And they go, well, we don't know, Mike. This doesn't what I think it's going. I think the road, well, maybe we got a trespass issue. I says, what datum is everybody in? Because they didn't know, they had the handheld GPS. It says, see that record? It says it's NAD 27. Okay, now I'm going to empower you. I'm going to show you how to switch your datum in that. In Alaska, in that area, was about 280 feet difference from NAD 83 to NAD 27. And so then they started navigating, and all of a sudden they're standing there in a 15-foot circle around the monument, and there's the 4 bearing trees, you know. And but that's how you can empower the public, that if they just want to, you know, find the corners. What scares me more is people are using these things like HuntX or doing something, and I don't need to look for a monument. I want to build my fence. It says right here, you know, I got an iPhone 14 or whatever, and that's the scary thing. You know, people aren't looking for monuments. They're going off some cartoon, get it surveyed database that's in some app that they got. So anyway, Trent, put me on there sometime if you're looking for a space filler, if that sounds good, and I'll represent that.
We will chat.
Be easy.
Okay. Got Jerry and then George.
Okay. And this ties in with Mike was just saying, with respect to using coordinates on corners. I was a grad student way back when NAD 83 was replacing NAD 27. And the big consternation in the mapping and the surveying and the GIS, the young GIS community at that point, was how do you get coordinates from the old datum into the new datum? Because there was no direct connection between the two. And even though we've gone through readjustments and refinement of NAD 83 since then, every time there's a readjustment, there's that same issue. It's a smaller magnitude, but it still exists. The point is that a set of coordinates is no good without knowing what it's all referenced to at any given time. One of my professors back then, Professor Jim Clapp, he was a proponent of save the rules. He says, instead of, and this goes back to just basic surveying practice, instead of transforming coordinates and introducing an error going to the next datum or adjustment, readjust the original data in the new datum. So saving the rules is saving the observations. That's what our original PLS notes are. Those are the original measurements and observations. Those aren't coordinates. And you know, that's what we need to do. And I'm afraid that we're going to be losing that with the speed of technology and that type of stuff happening now, is that we get caught up in this coordinate discussion, say, look how easy it is to get coordinates, and I can navigate to a position using coordinates, but it's still, face it, the physical monument on the ground that controls where we're at, and tying it back to the errors. The reason we have monument cushions is because surveyors aren't putting enough thought into how the errors accumulate. And the fact that the uncertainty in the position they come up with is big enough that it encompasses all those monuments that are in that pincushion. Pick one and go with it, you know. We're doing what I call the surveyor's equivalent of a dog pissing on a tree. We're there, we got to leave our mark too, simply because we're slightly different than somebody else is. So I think we're losing some of that because the technology is doing too much of the stuff for us, or we're allowing the technology to do too much of the stuff for us. That's just one of my soapboxes. So I'll quiet down now. And
I like those was that T16s that in your and behind you.
that's my T3, and I just got
T3. Okay.
Yeah, I just got my T3. It took me a search all the way to Israel to get one that I could afford, but I finally found one.
Oh, cool.
Back shelf, you can't see it here, but
yep.
Yeah, spent many an hour behind one of those guys.
George, go for it.
Okay, Jerry and Michael, I agree with both of you. Coordinate is, to me, is a good tool, but unless you know when and what information it's based on, it's not very reliable. Although it can get you close, it can't get you actually there. And I'm a firm believer, as I replied in the chat, I think we're missing out by not running lines, because there's often evidence along lines, and even back to original surveys, there's topo calls, there's all kinds of things that are noted in those that help you determine the location of a monument that you may not be able to find because it doesn't have a coordinate. And even in modern boundaries, there's evidence there, as we discussed last week, that will lead you to the correct location of a boundary line. Unless you run that line, you're not going to see that evidence.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Responsible to give a set of coordinates and not give any metadata with it, what datum, what epoch you're using. So if you just see a set of coordinates and think you're going to run with it, you're probably not a surveyor. You're probably a realtor or a hunter.
It's tough enough
you got to watch.
Tough enough getting surveyors to put their basis of bearing in a description, let alone putting the datum and all that information down for the coordinate system.
Well, yeah, I guess I would wonder who doesn't put their basis of bearing on their certificates.
Well, I cover a lot of that, so let's do that. Let's talk about coordinates as boundary evidence.
I will gladly take you up on that, Mr. Schroeder. We'll reach out. I'll get you. It'll be probably February, because we got January's booked. So.
Okay, well, I'm in Costa Rica to the 14th, so it'll be the second 2 weeks there.
All right, I'll work it out with you. Go for it, Ron.
Before we go, I want to give my contact information in case there's my contact. I do have a book that I wrote. It's a memoir of me growing up and how I became a land surveyor. It's I think a lot of little funny stories of doing stupid things as a kid and somehow surviving shenanigans. This guy over here, that's me. There's my middle brother. There's 2 years, and this is my youngest brother. There's 2 years separating us. And, but I always say that we grew up as trailer trash, but we weren't very fluent, but I think it's a good story about people have a gift and talent, and I'm able to find mine, and hopefully people will, if reading it, will incentivize them to do whatever their passion leaves them. If you email me and let me know, I'll send you a free book. I'll send you a book, no charge. If you just email me, give me your address, and I'll get you a book. Give it to me, and I'll get you a book. So
that's awesome.
Just wanted to say that. And Trent, before I'm a geoholic now. Thank you very much. Right. And I love Mentoring Monday, and I'll love coming back here and listening to you guys. So
love it. Thank you, Ron.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we're done until January 9th. And then we kind of always do like a business and a safety thing in January. So that's Dr. Nettleman will do running a small business the right way. And then we're going to do a safety presentation January 9th and January 23rd. So we'll take off the Monday holiday, the MLK holiday there. But so we have almost a month off now, but I hope everybody has a great holiday season, Christmas season, Hanukkahs, every season that's out there now. And it is a good and safe New Year's for sure. That's always an important one. So stay warm for you winter people. Hopefully we stay warm and no snow in Vegas. But I love everybody. I appreciate everybody's support again for another year. This is almost 2.25 years into it now. So I love it.
Thank you, Ron.
Everybody.
Thank you, Trent.
Of course, everybody. Have a good week, everybody.
All right.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye.